I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Review for January the 22nd, 2024. As is always the case in these videos, the flood pressure of mine alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look to the local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So we've got a couple systems that we're going to be talking about today, the same two from yesterday. We've got Tropical Low 5, or NVEST 90P, whichever one you want to call it, active in the Coral Sea. And this system may bring impacts, in fact, it's likely to bring impacts to the coastline of Queensland and Australia throughout the mid to latter half of the week. And then we're also going to be touching on now NVEST 92S north of Rodrigues, which could bring impacts to Mauritius and Rodrigues over the course of this week. I'll leave a timestamp to that storm if you want to skip ahead to that part of the video. So I'm going to be starting on 5U. Let's get right into it. So this is 5U. You can see on the visible satellite imagery as the sun is going up over the region and the morning hours are progressing. You can see we have a lot of just sort of organized in some ways and disorganized in others convection around what appears to be maybe a center around here, an area of low pressure here. You can sort of see underneath these clouds that we've got northwesterly winds on the northern side, but there's a little bit of slow turning in a clockwise manner, and it looks like this might be the low-level center trying to peek out there underneath the convection. Now, this convection has been sustaining over this portion of this general trough axis, which it is embedded in, for the past several hours, and the system does appear to be struggling still. You can see that we don't have a compact area of low pressure. We don't have this system really being a tropical cyclone right now. We have more of just a broad trough axis with a large stream of northwesterly flow on the northern side. So remember, center's here. And it sort of wraps around on the eastern side. Note how far southeast that is, by the way, from this apparent center into southeasterly winds, which extend pretty far away from this area of low pressure. And the ASCAP pass that we got earlier today had shown that while we didn't get the eastern side of the storm, that while the center was about here, we had this trough axis still extending pretty far west from this area of low pressure. And this is not a favorable sign for a tropical cyclone, just mainly because for a tropical cyclone to develop, you want convection to be all concentrated along one point of the center of circulation that is developing, not sprawled out like it is. You can see that in the water vapor. If the center is, say, about here, you've got all this convection sprawled way out away from the storm. It's not a concentrated bubble. And that has really been one of the factors I'd say that's been keeping the system from developing. Another one has been perhaps a little bit of shear. You can see, if you look here in focus, there's some thunderstorms that do blow up and get their top sheared off to the east. This is causing potentially some of the dry air further west to get into it. Some evidence of this might be in this visible satellite loop. You can sort of see some of these outflow boundaries here. That's these streams of what looks like milky cirrus clouds pushing this way in this loop, and I'll lay it out so you can see that. You can sort of see them like waves in the ocean. Those are outflow boundaries from thunderstorms that are collapsing from the dry air, and that's perhaps more of an indication that that shear is pushing in some of that dry air. You could sort of see some of the shear here, with some of these cloud tops being pushed as well towards the storm. So right now, the system's not doing the best, and really it is developing slower than models had anticipated. Now, this is not overly good news because a lot of the systems, a lot of the models that had this system developing earlier were the ones showing this system staying out to sea. But unfortunately, because this system is staying weaker, it's not going to have much of an influence, as it might have had if it was a stronger and more well-developed system by now, on the pattern around it. What we had a few days ago is we had the GFS having the system be a little bit east. That's another factor of it. It's a bit further west. But it was developing quickly and intensifying quickly on the GFS in the Coral Sea. And it was able to move down and disrupt the eastern portion of this ridge over Australia that allowed this trough to dig in a little bit more, closer to New Caledonia, and that allowed the system to track out to sea on a lot of those model runs. Unfortunately, because the system is weaker, the influence that it has within the environment is not as great. And now this ridge is able to nose in a little bit more further east, and this trough is really not going to be able to catch this system. We've seen models like the Canadian that had the idea still a little bit open on the system potentially, still staying offshore. We've even had that model come into agreement with the GFS and the European and agree on a landfall in Queensland. And this ridge will be putting it into about the central Queensland coastline. Exactly where along the coastline is still highly uncertain. There's a lot that could change from here on out, but we're generally honing in on the central Queensland coastline for a landfall, looking to be mid to late week. That's about Wednesday to Friday. And could it be of significant strength? It could, and I'm going to go into that in just a moment. I want to show you one more thing with track. This is a European ensemble plot from earlier today. You can see here's the initial point, and now every member of the European, which I believe it has maybe 30, maybe more members, you can see all of these tracks taking it into generally, like I said, the central Queensland coastline here, and none of them are taking it out to sea anymore, like we saw with the Canadian idea yesterday. All right, now for strength. The system will likely have a fairly favorable environment, and if it does manage to get itself consolidated over the next day or so, I'd say it would be able to take advantage of the environment, and it could intensify to a significant degree. Now, exactly how strong it gets, that's a little bit uncertain. We really have to see, when does the system actually become a tropical cyclone? We have expected the system to become a tropical cyclone for a couple days now, and here we are. The system is still disorganized, still not a tropical cyclone. And I think what we're really going to have to watch for is a lot of this convection west of the center. So remember, the center is about here. I think we're going to have to see a lot of this convection towards the west dissipate away, and then we start to see more organized convection fire and sustain and get the area of low pressure beneath those clouds to be more well developed. I think once that happens, then we can get tropical development. But exactly when that happens, a bit uncertain. Now, the GFS is still saying in the next 12 to 24 hours, maybe a bit longer, that could happen. And I'd say that's definitely a possibility, but there is also some possibility that takes a little bit longer, like we've had seemingly to be the long trend with this system. Now, you can see the environment aloft is fairly favorable. We've got this upper ridge over Australia. This is favoring some divergence to the west. That's the winds diverging away from the storm. And we do have a ridge placed to the east that will be providing some outflow as well to the southeast. That could also perhaps get a little bit in train with this little bit of a jet streak here over New Caledonia. Excuse me. But you can also see that this bridge is positioned a little bit to the east of the storm, and you can see in the streamlines that we do have a little bit of northerly flow. It's not too strong at this level, but we do have some northerly flow. If we investigate this further by going down into the mid-levels of the troposphere, you can see here's your ridge again, and now rather than having fairly weak winds aloft, we have pretty strong winds. You can see some pretty strong northerly flow going against the system, and if we look at a sounding from the GFS, this is a pretty significant shear in the mid-levels. You can see the low levels is trying to push it to the west, and we've got this strong mid-level northerly shear impinging upon the storm. And the mean shear value is about 14 knots. That's about moderate, and max shear about 28 knots. That's high shear. The shear being moderate, in the mean sounding at least, means that the system will likely be put under a bit of pressure from this, and I wouldn't be surprised if, say, the low level and the mid-level vortex do get a little bit tilted in this scenario. But if the system does manage to intensify and get its core well built before this shear really starts to kick in, as there will be a period of time before this where the shear is at its lowest before it starts to kick in, then I think the storm could fend it off a little bit, and we could see maybe some gradual intensification all the way up to the coastline if it plays its cards right. There's also a scenario here where the system continues to struggle, the shear comes in, and we don't actually get too strong of a system coming in. Now, most models right now are still saying that the system will probably get up towards cyclone strength. By cyclone strength, I'm talking about the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, which would be category 1, but in terms of the Australian scale, we're looking at maybe category 2, category 3 at this time, and that's certainly of significance. I think we had Jasper in December. That came in, I think, as a category 1 or 2. So we're looking at a category 3 storm. If it plays its cards right, perhaps category 4, but we'll have to see exactly how things pan out there. Now, just to show you some of the consistency between models, this is a European 500 millibar height map, and you can see that ridge once again with that strong northerly flow on the western side. And while the sounding immediately doesn't scream strong shear, there are some missing wind barbs here, so you can see in the mid-levels we don't have the wind data for that. But if you look at the photograph, if you know how to read that, you can see that we have some of the southeasterly wind in the low levels and more northeasterly wind in the mid-levels. And if you draw a shear vector between these, that gets you your northerly flow, your northerly shear that can be significant upon the system. And this is the Bureau of Meteorology forecast. I'm going to reload this to see if there's a new one in place. I just wanted to make sure. But we do, I want to mention, have a cyclone watch in place from St. Lawrence all the way up to just north of Bowen. I'm not exactly sure how to say this city name, so I'm going to avoid saying that, but you can see it there on the map. And as we go in time throughout the day today and into the day tomorrow, I'd imagine the cyclone watch is going to get extended further north. Right now, it looks like the center track is taking this to about Townsville. Of course, as I said, there's a lot of things that can change the exact track. So even if you're in even McKay or Cairns, keep in mind the storm can still track towards your area, and you could still get some significant impacts here. So just because the center track right now is going towards Townsville, don't think you're out of the danger zone. Alongside that, just note the significant wind field size here. There's a reason why, even though the center's coming into Townsville on this forecast, there's a cyclone watch all the way down to St. Lawrence. There could be some significant impacts way down there, even though the system may come in far enough north. Now, I imagine over the coming days, or the coming hours, really, we're going to start seeing these cyclone watches extended further north. I wouldn't be surprised to see one up by Cairns later today. But you can see their forecast as well, bringing it to a Category 3 storm. And we're looking at the January the 25th, which I believe is Thursday. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize, but I think it's Wednesday or Thursday. So you're looking once again at that mid to late week time frame there. But the impacts associated with a storm are again strong winds, especially near the core of the storm. That could be of Category 3 strength on the Australian scale, and heavy rainfall as well. I know this area got a lot of rainfall during Jasper, so you really don't need a lot of rainfall, but you could still get some significant rainfall from the system. And down the coast, particularly from where the system makes landfall, you will have some significant onshore push that could lead to storm surge issues. So make sure you're staying tuned to your local weather office and the Bureau of Meteorology for the latest forecast information for the storm, and make sure your cyclone preparedness kit is ready and you're taking the necessary precautions given to you by your local emergency management. And I'll have future videos as we go throughout the course of this week on the system as it does evolve. And I'll also leave a link to the Bureau of Meteorology for you all, so you don't have to go searching for it. You can just click on the link at the top of the description. All right, we're now going to move west. We're now going to be talking about an invest north of Rodrigues. You can see, just to orient yourself a little bit, here's the storm right now, and here is Rodrigues, that small island there. Mauritius is west of this off your screen. Now, this system is still fairly disorganized. It's still very broad. I can show you that on the vorticity plot. Here is Invest 91S. This was that little low off the coastline of Madagascar. This is working its way, just associated with this trough that our other Invest 92S is now a part of, and you can see where 92S is here, a more concentrated area of vorticity. But you can see it's all strung out. This is not what you want for a tropical cyclone. Similar with 90P. If you're wondering what you want to look for in a tropical cyclone, just look at Cyclone Angrek over here in the eastern part of the basin. More compact there, more well-defined. Well, here we don't have that with our Invest. Now, over the coming days, the environment is going to be favorable, as we talked about, and development is likely here as the system does come south. Now, in terms of really impacts and track, not much has changed. Really, the only change we've had is a GFS has trended a little bit further west. I can show you that on these past few runs. You can see in few runs earlier, say yesterday, it was closer to Rodrigues, and we've gotten to track more closer to Mauritius, but it does look like in the most latest run, turning it a little bit further east. And those small details will have to just be ironed out over the coming days. Not exactly sure where it's going to track. It depends on development, and it also just depends on small wobbles that are fairly unpredictable at this range, even 2 to 3 days out. Now, the key message here really remains the same. This system is not likely to be rapidly intensifying, but it will still likely intensify some. The environment is favorable for that, and the system will be broad. So even though the system may track in between both of the islands of Mauritius and Rodrigues, you could absolutely still get significant wind impacts. That can include tropical storm force winds. If the center does get a little bit closer to you, you could potentially get cyclone force winds or cyclone force gusts. And regardless of track, outer bands will be likely for both islands and even potentially La Reunion on the western side, and that could cause some significant rainfall issues and potentially some tornadoes. So make sure you're staying tuned to your local weather office in Mateo, France for the latest information on that. This is the forecast map from Mateo, France. You can see the high chance bubble of tropical development here. More focused west today with current guidance, but keep in mind in Rodrigues, you're still not out of the threat zone here. You could still absolutely get a lot of impact from this storm. And finally, one more map. This is the potential rainfall from the GFS. Now, this only goes through 3 days, so keep in mind that more rain will likely follow here. You can see very significant rainfall here. I believe these purples and getting into pinks is about 100 millimeters or more, and that could spread over both the islands of Mauritius and Rodrigues as we go throughout the course of the week. And you may get a little bit more if the storm tracks closer to you. Hopefully we get the track just in between here so we can give the cyclone force winds and the heaviest rainfall offshore, but that's not a guarantee right now. So for those in Mauritius and Rodrigues, once again, stay tuned to your local weather office. And I'll leave a link to MFR and the Mauritius Meteorological Services website in the description, so you can skip ahead to their website and get the latest information that you need to. And if your emergency management tells you to take any precautions, make sure you take the right precautions here as the system comes through your region. But that's all that I've got to talk about today. A lot going on. That's not all that's going on in the tropics. We've still got Tropical Cyclone Engrek, and there is still a system over Australia, but those are not really too imminent of concern today. We're really focusing on these two systems. But I'll have future uploads throughout the rest of this week, so stay safe in Australia and Mauritius and Rodrigues. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.